Good evening. As Molly mentioned, my name is Sujata. I'm the President and CEO of Chicago Foundation for Women. And along with Dorri McWhorter of the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago, I am delighted to welcome all of you for the book launch of Vote Her In. First, my thanks to several folks who made this happen. First of all, WeWork, of course, who's hosting the event, specifically Leo Reef and Kim Smith. Thank you so much. Women and Children First, who's handling the book sales. Thank you very much. Yolanda Daniel, Financial Services Executive and Finance Fellow to the Aspen Institute for her sponsorship of the tasty treats we have there. And Agate Publishing for making additional contributions both to the YWCA as well as to Chicago Foundation for Women. This second book by Rebecca Sive comes at a time when we need it, when we can believe change can happen, that it is women who are going to lead the change, and that we have solutions in our hands. Much as it may seem like this is not possible, I truly believe that we are going to make change happen. And Rebecca gives us a roadmap which lays out the power of women coming together to make change, building each chapter in her book on the inspiring protest signs at the 2017 march. She puts forward clear action steps that will help us elect a woman to our nation's highest office. So in addition, Rebecca Sive's experience provides expertise for this book. Just a little bit of bio about her in case you don't know it. She's held executive positions in business, government, philanthropy, and nonprofits. She was a gubernatorially appointed founding member of the Illinois Human Rights Commission and has been recognized by her alma maters, both Carleton College and the University of Illinois, for her distinguished community leadership. Rebecca was a founding member of Chicago Foundation for Women and was part of the national group of women leaders who developed women's issue agendas for Presidents Clinton and Barack Obama. She's the author, her first book, of Every Day is Election Day, and has taught at the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy. It is my pleasure to invite Rebecca to share the story behind the book and the key concepts. I have no doubt that you will want to read the full book once she's done that, and books are available. She will sign them for you. Please stay following her remarks. We have a double treat, as you can see, with Julia Stasch, the president of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, who has written the foreword to the book. And Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx, who has also contributed to the book. And they, along with Rebecca, will be in discussion that is being moderated by Dorri. So please join me in welcoming the author, Rebecca Sive.
All right, I'm not going to cry. And I want to say it is really such a treat to be here with everybody. It's been very important to me and to my colleagues at the Y and CFW and elsewhere to be able to take the time to write this book. I'm glad that it has received the reception it has so far. And I want to start by thanking my husband, Steve Tomaszewski, for giving me the time and the space and the discipline. Because as Sharon Lee and I were talking a moment ago, writing is a lonely process. And you just have to stick with it and keep going. And then at the end, if you're lucky, as I have been, you have a book published and you get to share it with the world. So secondly, excuse me, is this all right? I wanted to thank Dorri and Sujata and especially Molly Silverman at the Y for their outstanding work this evening and overall leadership for women in Chicago. If you would join me. YWCA, and a really, really special person. So I want her to know that we have thanked her greatly for her work, as always. And last but not least, but you'll hear more from them later, are my good girlfriends, Kim and Julia. I've known Julia for a very long time, but we won't talk about that. We'll just say we've worked hard together and enjoyed it. With Kim for not quite so long, but it's been a treat in every respect. I want to just say a couple words, and then I'm going to briefly read from the introduction, and then we'll go into the panel. And as I'm sure the rest of you have done as well, I've been reflecting on the meaning of these last couple weeks and what has been said about women, how women have been treated, basically how so many women in their experience have been disrespected. And I have concluded, and I know this has been true for me in the past when I felt this way, that what I have always done is return to my roots in Chicago and return to the women I know here who do good work, to the men here who do good work, and we just, in this great city, put our best foot forward each day and try to make a difference. So this panel and this discussion and this book are just a part of that work. I want everyone here, I hope, as much as you can, to feel energized when you leave here and to say that, to speak colloquially, I guess, Kavanaugh means nobody like that. No one disrespecting women. That is what we're going to fight for, and that's what Voter In is about. So I want to now turn to this introduction, and I have to say that one thing that makes the writing less lonely and more special than it might otherwise be is having the help and support of friends. And when I first went to Julia to ask her if she would write the foreword, she was right there. And when I went to Kim and Lisa Madigan and Anna Valencia, and I said, would you share your wisdom holding executive office, which is of course what Madam POTUS will be doing, would you share your wisdom in this book? And all three of them did that in a heartbeat, and I'm sure we are all will continue to benefit from that. So here's the introduction, and you'll recognize one name here. It sort of lays out what the book tries to accomplish, and I think what we're all about in this campaign to Voter In. And it begins with these marvelous images done by Margaret Grable from Agate Publishing. She did an amazing job, and I thank her for that, of posters from the Women's March. And a quote from the New York Times 2 days after Hillary Clinton lost, in which the writer wrote, "Girls can be anything, just not president." And I felt, as I'm sure so many of you did, no, that's not right. We're going to change this. Maybe it didn't happen this time, but we have women to look to, starting with Hillary, for how we can do this. We need to elect the first woman U.S. president as soon as possible. This book presents the many reasons why her election will help every woman and the actions every woman can take to vote her in. No matter where you come from or how you define yourself, Voter In is your guide to winning our revolution, one as necessary as America's first. This book contends that the very best strategy for creating a land of equal opportunity and justice for all is electing our first woman president, and that Madam President will improve every woman's life, because the cornerstone of our democracy is its commitment to fairness and equality for all. Further, when a woman is POTUS, no one will be able to plausibly argue that women are qualified to hold executive positions. Specifically, the election of Madam President will pave the way for more women attaining executive, political, and governmental power, which will demonstrate that gendered roles have no place in today's politics or government, including the Supreme Court. It all gets back to the land of equal opportunity. Illinois Attorney General Lisa Madigan told me in an interview, it's not, and the men in power don't want to give it up. It has to be taken. This book explains why and how. Yes, she can is the message. Almost 100 years since suffrage, American women are still making only incremental progress in winning political office, whether legislative or executive. Yet, as we'll see, research has shown that far more than their male colleagues, it is women public officials who advocate family-friendly policies that benefit women and girls. Women also bring different life knowledge, skills, and sympathies to political office, and they can apply that knowledge and those skills to changing the world for the better for all. That's the purpose. I'm looking forward to our conversation here and then a conversation with everyone. And of course, I will sit and sign books and talk for as long as you want me to. So thanks for having me.
So thank you, Rebecca, for giving us an opportunity, and our sister Sujata, who's just amazing. So I feel like Chicago is so special. One, the fact that we have these amazing women here, and the fact that we have such a strong community of women leaders in Chicago. So I'm just so grateful that we get to do this work here, because it needs to get done, and if not us, who? And so I'm glad that Rebecca has continued to really be such an advocate in this journey to really get women elected. So I know that we were introduced slightly, at least by name, to our panelists, but I do want to add a little more flavor to our panelists, because we do have such spectacular women here, and I'm so grateful to even have the opportunity to moderate this panel. So first I'll start with Julia Stasch. So Julia, as we know, is the leader of MacArthur Foundation, so the president of John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and as Rebecca mentioned, is also the author of the McWhorter book. But I have to say this, because we won't say the year, but Julia was our first recipient of the Racial Justice Award for the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago. So talking about a woman walking the talk. So that's Julia, and so grateful to have had her continued leadership around social justice in the city of Chicago and beyond, quite honestly, for some time. So grateful for that. And then we have the amazing Kimberly Foxx, our state's attorney for Cook County, Illinois, and I have to say, Kim, it's just such an honor to see you. And I'm going to cry because I'm so grateful for the work that you've done to seek justice in the city of Chicago. So thank you for everything that you've done as well. So thank you. So let's get started, ladies. The one thing you'll learn about this panel, particularly Rebecca, that we do not hold back, and so we're just going to have a candid and honest conversation about what needs to happen in our country. And so we'll just get started. So as Rebecca has already said, that we already know that no woman has been elected president of the United States. And very few women have held other executive political positions, elected political positions, so whether it's in Illinois or elsewhere. And the big question is why? So why do you think this has happened? So Julia, you hold the mic, so you start.
Okay, thank you. I think that we should remember that, except for the artifact of the Electoral College, we did elect a woman president. So it's clear that the Electoral College isn't going anywhere ever, probably. So we have to be very strategic. So I have that thought in my head, but at the same time, executive political office, executive political power is one of the scariest powers that someone can hold. As a matter of fact, as I say in my foreword, actually that kind of power plays out in the lives of every single person. And so when you have, as we have discovered, when you have an enormous swath of people who are afraid of losing their power, we just aren't talking about women aren't ready, or the channels aren't, the paths aren't laid. We're talking about some people, hopefully not a majority, some people who feel that the changes underway in our society imperil their historic power and position. And if the people that are knocking at the door are different than they are, there's going to be plenty of resistance to it. So at the same time that we can have a popular vote that could have put Hillary Clinton in the office, we have a backlash. We have a demographic wave that is scary to some people, and that's very hard to prepare for. And so I think those two things actually can exist at the same time.
And we'll share them out there. So as good as they are at everything, I know sharing is one of them, so thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with what Julia says. I mean, power concedes nothing. And when you look historically, particularly here in the United States, again, as Rebecca pointed out, women just got the right to vote 100 years ago. And the subjugation of women throughout history, and the belief then that they will then have power, then what will they do with it, right? Will you then use the power in the same way that the power was used against you? And what does that then do to the structures that are at play? And so, as someone who holds an executive position, I think it's important, and I say it wherever I go, as the elected prosecutor, right? If you run the elected office in the county, I am less than 1% of elected prosecutors across the country. I'm a woman of color who holds this position. Less than 1% of elected prosecutors in the United States of America are women of color. And it is not that women of color don't, care about fairness and justice. And in fact, have been historically on the other end of that. But the universe that we occupy in trying to get these positions have, one, been heavily male-dominated. 80% of people who hold positions like mine are white males. 80%, 8 out of 10. And the conversations and the narratives about who gets to occupy that space. What does it mean to be in these positions? How do we define the characteristics, right? People talk about law and order and toughness and having strong wills and this kind of masculine narrative about most elected positions, right? I was joking with Rebecca when she was interviewing me that I remember as a young person, the boys on the playground saying, women can never be president because, they get their period and they get all emotional and they do all the erratic things. And I look at this president who does not have the excuse of menstruation. But I often find people, even in the elect, who still hold these notions of what femininity and power look like, and believe that they are mutually exclusive. And so, for some, I've seen some women who are very capable, very motivated, very willing to stand up and advocate for their communities, who also believe that they have to reconcile what it means to be a wife and a mother, to be feminine, in spaces where historically the adjectives describing who gets to be there leave them out. And so that struggle for what does this space actually look like is very real. And I think there has to be a real intentional effort, a real intentionality about even how we describe these positions of leadership to ensure that they're inclusive of women, and particularly diverse women.
I would just add one thing, Dorri. I think this is something kind of hit me over the head as I was writing. It's, the process for women moving into legislative office has been fairly incremental, but there has been a significant change and advance in the last 3 decades. The same is not true for executive office, and it exactly goes to the points that Julie and Kim were making. So what we need to do as we're talking about vote her in is on the one hand, vote her in every single one of those hundreds of women who are running this year, but also think about the particular challenges of that executive office. I mean, it may be the case that people are less fearful of women in legislative positions because they're in a group, right? They don't have that ultimate power. So as you think about your own work campaigning and advocating, think about your arguments to make the case for, yes, women need to sit in that office, as well as be on committees and in legislatures with 100 people or whatever, because it's really different, and it really proves a different point.
So on that thought, and staying with that, if we do, when we do elect a woman president, do you see that having an impact on other executive offices, whether they're state or other local executive office? So how do you think that would actually impact political outcomes relative to those executive offices when we achieve that? When?
I think actually it's on 2 levels. First of all, of course, when we see what leadership looks like when a woman is leader, then unconsciously one begins to say, well, that's an acceptable image of leadership. So it's really important to have the, the eye on the prize of the presidency, the eye on the prize of the presidency. But at the same time, we have to have more Kims, more Lisa, more Anna, more women who make that face of leadership that's closer to the lives of individuals. So I would say just as important, and maybe the topic of another book, which is order in everywhere. I actually brought something that I wanted to share, and Kim opened the door to this. But she said that women, the perception of women or the placement of women in a certain spot in the hierarchy is historic. And so I came across this. I'm reading, over the centuries, male authorities have repeated again and again their conviction that, as St. Peter said, according to the Gospel of Thomas, women are not worthy of life. I'll give you that citation later. But then even as recently as 1971, an Episcopalian bishop wrote, the sexuality of Christ is no accident, nor is his masculinity incidental. This is the divine choice. So this is deep within our spiritual lives, deep within a sense of, what is, not just what is leadership, but what is woman. And I think we have to really understand that that's what we're up against. Can't follow that one.
While you're processing that, to give you some data on the question Dorri raised, it is absolutely the case. It doesn't matter what institutional sector of American life, for that matter, global life, you look at, and you all know this from your own experience, the higher up the ladder you go, the fewer women there are. It's business, it's universities, it's government, it's philanthropy, it's movie stars, you name it. So my contention is that by electing, to the point that Kim and Julia were making, is that by electing a woman president, a woman to the most powerful executive position in the world, right? We will show that women can lead anything everywhere. So I absolutely think that there will be a difference. And I think that the sooner we get there, the more we'll see that. And the further down and across, we will see women leading. So the answer to this, about the importance of this, is clear. It will help women wherever you are and wherever you want to lead.
So on that, and Rebecca, it's like, your lead-ins are so good for me, I appreciate that. So now that I'm over the shock of women even existing in the first place, which is a miracle, so we should all just be happy to be here, it sounds like. And I want to cite that, I want to know where that came from. But having said that, so as we think about women governing, what should that look like? When you talk about being elected everywhere, what should it look like in terms of how we should think about as women take more executive offices? How does that impact governing? What should that look like? What are your thoughts on it?
So Kim has all kinds of things to say on this in the book and right now, so I'm turning the mic to her.
Okay, good. We're like co-moderating everybody.
I do have a lot trying to figure out how to say it right, politely. I think part of the issue is, and Rebecca and I had a little back and forth about this, of when women get in these offices, one, holding to, again, those fundamental values that you have. I've been in spaces throughout my career where someone is so finally excited to get in the room that they then try to conform to those characteristics of the other people y'all are not, or conform to the characteristics of those others in the room. And that isn't the leadership that I want. When you go in and you are conforming to norms that have excluded you out of fear of not being able to occupy the space, I think you do more harm than good. I don't think that you should go in incrementally, like I don't want to rock the boat, I want to be one of the guys, you look back at the 80s movies and everyone was wearing the same boxy suits and, so that they could fit in. And I think for me, I think it's really important that you lead unapologetically as a woman. You have to lead unapologetically as a woman. And for me, that was, as I was hiring my executive staff, I was looking for, the best and brightest talent. And it meant that we hired more women than men. And someone came to me, a woman that I respected very highly, and said, "Oh, you got too many women. They're gonna think because you're a woman in this spot that this is what you're doing now." And we laughed, but it was with such sincerity that it was that we then have to conform to prove that we're not gonna do the thing that somebody, and I was sad, right? Because this was a woman who had to navigate spaces long before I had this spot, and trying to figure out ways to ensure our survival in these spaces without actually thinking about what it means to lead in these spaces. And so I think it's really important that you have women in these spaces who put those values at the forefront. And so for me, I do have a lens that has been shaped how I was raised in this world, how I view all of the different roles that I carry, and my policy agenda follows from that. The hires that I make follow from that. I don't want people to just give me, when we're trying to do promotions, all guys happen to be the people who are ready for promotion. Take that back. Come back to me and when you have a list that's more diverse, and not being afraid of that. And I will tell you, I've been challenged internally from men who have worked with me who are not used to that it feels like, equity feels like you're taking something from someone. But it's premised on this belief that Julia just talked about, it was so biblical, that you're undeserving, like having to prove your worth and desirability. But I think, the one thing that I will say is that I have been, and it's not even a fearlessness, I don't know how not to be a woman. I don't know how not to do it. And I also don't ever feel comfortable trying to conform, again, to practices that have been so detrimental to so many for the comfort of those who won't see power.
Who may not know. I want to introduce Julia on this topic. Yes, because this is really important.
What is this?
So for those of you who may not know, Julia was the first woman chief of staff in the city of Chicago. So talk about executive power, all right? So we want to hear her.
They did get afraid, I have to admit, they were afraid. But at the end of the day, they were powerful. And so, I know what it feels like to have people who want you to fail and how you have to navigate that. And finally, you have to say, I'm past my sell-by date and I need to leave. So sometimes you need to be very clear about when your power is so diluted that you actually can't be effective anymore. So that was really inspiring, wasn't that? One of the things I wanted to say to follow up on what Kim said about not conforming to the practices of the worldview that excluded you. I want to add one tiny thing, which I think was implicit in what you said, which is let's not have our own exclusionary practices. Let's make sure that women's power and women's leadership is not for women, but it's for all. Because that's the only way that we're going to get out of the ping pong game, which is I'm in power, you're in power. I'm in power. We see this now at the national level, and it is so debilitating to our democracy. So I think that women as leaders can be above this, and so that's why when you're a woman in power, as important as it is to say, and now I'm going to pay attention to women's issues that have not been on the table in the past, it's really important to pay attention to the issues that improve the lives of all. Now I know that sounds a little bit like a rising tide, raises all boats, or whatever that platitude is. But at the end of the day, for women to have power, they have to be supported by men. And so how do you get supported by men of goodwill, It's if your policies and your practices and your leadership are on behalf of all.
So, on that, do you have something to add to that, Rebecca? Because if we could follow up on that, Julia, so what would those policies look like? So we all know that women are not monolithic, but if women are in these executive government roles, what policies should we be focusing on? Or make a priority, of course.
I mean, it depends on, well, when I think about what we're doing at the MacArthur Foundation, which is not elected political power, but it's how do we think about all? And when you think about all, you say, who's having a hard time getting in that front door because they're in a wheelchair? Or what does the pool look like when you're considering hiring someone? Or what does the policy look like when, when a family has a baby? I mean, all of these things, this is at the very personal level. But then, what do workplace regulations and requirements look like? What do access to the assets that facilitate communication, that facilitate access to capital? All of these things are for all, even though they have historically excluded not only women, but people of color. So I think actually a for all lens is something that women could bring to every single policy and every single decision that comes before them.
I appreciate that. We'll go ahead.
I would just like to add to this. I think I completely agree with Julia, but I also think, and I think in my own experience in political office and other places where I was an executive, what I found was not only did I have to look at the lens for all, right, but how do I make sure, and frequently I was the only woman in the room, and that fortunately has now started to change. But I also have to be the advocate for the women who are in that for all. And so to answer your question, Dorri, I really think that that we need to kind of think through just to the next level the kinds of policies that Julia was suggesting. How do particular women, how can they be helped in this circumstance, whether it's women who are disabled or women of color or older women who are being discriminated against. So it's a bifurcated responsibility. It's complicated, but I personally feel we're up to the task.
Okay.
I would agree with that, with both. And with another fine tune on it. So for example, some of the work that MacArthur and we've been doing around bail, right? And so everyone talks about bail in the criminal justice space, but there's a disproportionate impact on women as it relates to bail. Like when men who go to jail need money to get bailed out, there are a lot of women who are coming forth with this money to do that. When women go in, there aren't men coming to bail them out. They tend to hang out there longer. The impact on what it means to have a primary caregiver if you're a single parent in jail is very different when you're not the custodial parent. And so there is an equity in making sure that our criminal justice is fair, but there are also some real huge disproportionate impacts on women that you have to be intentional about. And so for me, and there is this, if we had a system that is right, if we worked on these policy objectives, then the boats would rise. Some boats are just so far down below sea level that we have to be very intentional about saying, listen, we have to remedy this for this group. And I think, one of the things that frustrates me when we talk about what is the lens for women, every issue is a women's issue. Every single issue, whether you're, to Julia's point, you're talking about access to capital to start a small business, again, that disproportionality of who gets capital determines her fate and the generations behind her and the ability to access and create wealth. I'm a fervent believer in women's autonomy over their bodies and fought very hard as board president of Planned Parenthood, but the narrative about the things that women care about fall only on women's reproductive rights. And we're starting to have that conversation of those rights they branch out into other things, the autonomy over my body and when to choose to start a family or not. determine whether I'm going to be able to be in the workforce or what kind of opportunities I have. And so we're starting to talk about how they're all intersectional, but we have to be careful of having other people define what our issues are for us. We have
So I thought of a question that you're not prepared to ask, so I thought I would answer it.
How's it? Co-moderation here. Go ahead.
So actually, this just popped into my mind, and this is a question about what are some of the things that women have to be in executive, especially elected, but even appointed positions. And the number one thing that I would say is they have to be tough. And I remember when I was working for Mayor Daley, somebody criticized me, and I went into the office and somebody criticized me, and he looked at me and he said, "Toughen up." And so when I think about the times, particularly when I was in the Clinton administration, the times that I was criticized for decisions I would make, or even I was the target of a whispering campaign, and a letter arrived on the desk of the head of the agency, and it said that I was keeping men in holding pens. And I thought, where are those? I mean, it was much more complex, and I was much more Machiavellian, apparently, than what I was doing. But, I mean, I bet Kim would have something to say about how you really have to toughen up against criticisms and not feel that a criticism requires a response. I mean, sometimes they spark self-reflection, but in terms of external response or emotional response, and I don't mean that any women are emotional, but the fact is that criticism goes with power, and you have to be ready to let it roll off your back.
Kim, or Rebecca. Both of you, I'm sure, can speak to this.
Have you been criticized?
Today.
Yeah. So,
So we'll circle back to you.
we're going to come back to Kim. I just wanted to say that on this point that we all have these battle scars, and I think that what's important about that is, and this is something I've always found hard to do, which is why I guess I'm advising that we do more of it as we work to rise. Sometimes it really is hard to take, right? And it's really tough, and it's lonely, and so I want to say, if we talk about what do we need to do as we pursue leadership, we always need to reach out to friends and women colleagues who, like as not, are sharing the very same experience. And I think that's, at least for me, I would say, has gotten me through some tough times.
Yes. I want to just a note to, yes, you should be tough in it, and the virtue of learning when to speak and not, respond to every criticism, respond to every nitpick, is you learn that the callus grows over time. But I also do want to caution against an over-graciousness that we sometimes have. I think when I look at what happened a few weeks ago with Serena Williams, and you owe me an apology, I can't tell you how many spaces I've been in where it has been like this public, I'm going to do this, and there's a response that you want. Now, I have a myriad of responses based on where I am, or who can hear me or recording. But I think there's a tendency sometimes that even as we try to balance that, as we try to stave off what it means to be a woman, we don't want to look weak, we don't want to, that there's a graciousness that is extended that will sometimes be to your detriment. And so for me, it is being tough, and tough meaning that taking criticism and being resilient. Resiliency is key. You're going to fall, you're going to fail. You cannot walk into this, I can't fail because the whole gender is on my back. And so that will get in your head. But also, I have had people say some really ill things to me that I know that they would not say if I were a man, if I were a white man, maybe not a white woman. And there's that balance of I don't want to look like a victim by calling that out, but I also need you sometimes to know that I see you. And maybe if you are inclined to be checked in this moment, you won't do that for the next person. As Serena said, if I don't stand, maybe the call doesn't go my way today, but perhaps for the next person coming behind me, it will. And so trying to find that balance of what does tough look like, it doesn't mean fighting every battle. You will be exhausted. But it is the learning of which battles are worth fighting, not even if you're gonna win it, but for the person who comes behind you. And so I balance, and I will admit early in my leadership, I extended grace far more frequently than I would have, because I watched other people who, and I would say this, people would do things around me in my leadership, and I'd say, would they do that to Ron? Would they do that to, and I know the answer is no. And whatever the position, whatever one thought of Ron's leadership, I know that the expectation of how people treated him was very different than what they were giving me. And so even the grace of like, oh, well, they didn't know, they didn't understand. Well, hell, you probably shouldn't have a job if you don't know or understand how to treat the people in positions of leadership. And so that would be my caution, is that yes, be tough, be resilient, but also do not cede your power, because people will challenge it and try to check it every single day. And there are ways that you can do it subtle, and gentle and graceful, and sometimes you just gotta chop people down.
So we say in our office, don't let the tool fool you. Right. So one of the things that I'm going to ask one more question, but I do want to open up, so I'm giving you all an opportunity to start thinking about this panel, who clearly doesn't need me as a moderator. So I'm going to try to do that. So maybe you all will let me help you ask your questions. And so I will. So how do we get there? So what do you think we need to do to organize to get a woman president elected?
So I'm glad you asked the question. Because I was talking to someone earlier today, and I said, well, I mean, my training is as a historian, but also as a community organizer, and I wasn't particularly trained as a writer. For me, the writing is the vehicle for organizing. And so the book lays out a number of steps that every single woman can take to make this happen. So there's a lot there to think about, but in the first place, what I wanted to say to you is this is entirely doable. The data, the outcomes, what Julia pointed out earlier about we did elect a woman president once already, it's all there for us. It's about being smart campaigners in the right places at the right time, understanding that we don't have to win every precinct, 50+1 will do. And secondly, taking on the responsibility, each of us, as we engage in this campaign and take these actions, to organize among our own friends. And it's kind of been amazing to me, and I think Kim and Julia would share this view, to see that when I've stepped up, and it's not amazing, but it's really satisfying and encouraging about continuing, to see how other women, when you start talking about, yes, we can do this, and here are the steps we can take. And the ripple effect this sounds like really old school, I'm betraying my age, but it's sort of like a Tupperware party or a Mary Kay party or something, right? I mean, if you talk to 10 women and each of them talk to 10 and each of them talk to 10, right? I mean, we have to be sophisticated about this, but we also just have to say to every single woman we know, yes, she can, yes, we can. So that's, as we go forward, we'll look to leaders, we'll become leaders ourselves, and we will model successful women leaders who have won these offices, like him.
I would say we have to maintain urgency. I think, we saw what happened in 2016, and there was this kind of collective shock and this reeling and recoiling, and there's this level of activism that is happening right now, and this, administration continues to give you things to be activated about. But even outside of a pressing challenge, know that we are under attack. Know that the urgency of the moment didn't subside in 2016. Didn't subside with the swearing in of the Supreme Court Justice again last night. I see people all the time. I have 4 girls, and I talk to young people, young women all the time, and someone said, I'm going to be the first woman president. And I was like, I hope not. I don't have time for that. How are you? Like, we don't have time for that. Do not entertain young women who tell you I'm going to be the first woman president, because you're going to tell them we don't have time for that. And I think we have to believe that we do not have time for that. It's been 100 years since the vote. We've looked at the trajectory of we do not have time. And so what I would say to all of you, as you're organizing your groups, as you're putting together what your issues are that you want to advocate for, do it with the level of urgency. And it doesn't have to have theater or theatrics. You don't have to envision a Handmaid's Tale to do it. Look at what's happening right now and realize that the urgency of now requires all hands on deck, the support of one another, that there is not space for us to, be entrenched in our own little secular issues, but that we cannot afford for every election cycle to not have more women running for these types of office, or less women than the one before. So Hillary ran, and we were all very proud. The expectation should now be, because I expect every presidential election a man to run. I expect it because that's what they do. We should expect that every presidential election there is a credible candidate that is a woman in that election.
So I'll just add one tiny additional thought, and that is, let's make sure that we make a point of turning out for the marches, turning out for the gatherings where there are many, many people, because there's nothing more inspiring than the collective. And I know that when I watched, the Women's March and watched other gatherings here in Chicago, I had a lump in my throat. I said, I still want to be part of that. And I can imagine younger women saying, I want to be part of that too. And so then, of course, each woman can say, what do I do to be part of it? But I think one of the most powerful things is the communication of the critical mass. So we should be part of that.
Absolutely. All right, who's ready for a question? That's great. Please stand and project.
Okay, so hi, my name is Deja. I'm an analyst at the Consulting Alliance, so I'm aware of your work. But my question is, so women are half of the population, but we often ignore men for the system that they've designed and created. So how do we bring men to these conversations, and how do we engage them and also be responsible for voting permanent? Because I feel like a lot of the pressure and burden is put on women to free themselves, and so how do we engage men?
Thank you.
Good question. Millions of men voted for Hillary Clinton. Millions of men in this election, of all these hundreds of women who are running for office, are going to be voting for women candidates. So you're absolutely right. There's a daily challenge of making sure that the men in your circle and in your workplace understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and if you can enroll them in the cause, do so. But don't let anyone say to you that American men, a huge number of them, aren't committed to social justice, meaning equality for women, because they are. That is just a way of pushing us to the side, of disabling us, and it's wrong.
I saw other hands.
Hi. So we talked a lot tonight about the reticence of people in power to give up power. What do you think the cultural backlash will be when we vote in our Madam President? How do we support our country through that?
Well, make no mistake, there will be a terrible backlash.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at what we're harvesting from 8 years of the presidency of Barack Obama,
Yeah.
the liberation that people have to express the hate that is, I can't even imagine within the White House how many death threats there were every day. And so I say in my foreword that actually the election of Barack Obama ripped the Band-Aid of complacency off of our views about race. I think the same thing will happen with the first woman president. And as a matter of fact, it's going to be one of those things that we have to get through to get there. And so we should expect and prepare for a period of heightened and anti-female dynamics. And so that will make it even harder, but that's one of the reasons that we have to do it, so we can get past that into the more honest place where we can actually see who's with us and who's against us. And once you know who is really against us and not just, feigning respect for women, even with like lowered expectations for them, when it's all out in the open, I think it's going to be easier to tackle and then try to heal.
I think we're in the backlash right now. This woman had the audacity to get more of the popular vote than President Trump. She had the audacity to be more knowledgeable on foreign affairs. She had the audacity to, prepare for debates. And come off as smart and credible. And there was this notion, and again, all of the characteristics that that toxic society put on her, like what did that look like? It is, disheartening when we see, that 53% of white women voted for Trump, while there was a credible woman who was there, and what that then looked like in this continued unravel. I think we're in that backlash. I think when you get in and are able to, demonstrate and do the work, and you are able to produce results, one would hope that wouldn't continue, but we continue. I think we're 51% of the population. It's not even just 50-50. But when I watch what happened with Kavanaugh last week and the conversations around that, the President of the United States, before he was elected, was caught on video using vulgarities talking about women. If that's not a backlash, that he still, even though he had less than a popular vote, that Mitch McConnell and others continue to stand by him despite whatever, please don't be surprised at anything else that comes out that is horrible for women and that this Congress will continue to support. Please don't be surprised when you see a Susan Collins who's like, oh, I know, and then does it. We are in the midst of the backlash. And so, which again, to me, is why the urgency is so strong, because I don't think it gets any better. I think it continues to get worse. But I think until we get there and demonstrate and show what that leadership looks like, feels like, and delivers, and we continue the push, it becomes harder for whatever the ultimate. There was not a woman put on the Supreme Court. The judges that this president has put on the bench, they're almost 90% men. We are in the backlash right now.
Wonderful. So I'm going to take my moderator's liberty and ask the last question so that we can get you to sign in these books. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, Kim. I just, when we elect a woman, we know that across other sectors of society, in corporate America, for example, nonprofits, for example, that we also have a dearth of women executive leadership. So when we elect a woman president, do we think that'll have an impact on the other sectors? So I want to get your perspective on that before we wrap up.
I think it goes back to something we said together at the beginning, which is the more we see what leadership looks like, and it looks like women, the easier it is to say, yes, a woman can have that position of leadership. And so, just like Rebecca says in the book, once we have a woman in that position, it both inspires other women to say, look, the battle is worth the prize. And then it also makes it possible for other people to say, I don't always picture a man as a leader. So I'm not sure there'll be the instantaneous ripple effect, but I think there's this subtle, I see what leadership looks like, and a leader can be a woman.
So
Every time I think about this issue, and I know everyone here remembers this photograph, there's a photograph that Pete Souza took of a young African-American boy in the Oval Office with President Obama, and he wanted to touch the president's hair.
Yeah.
Are you really like me? And I think that's the answer to the question, that every little girl and big girl and older girl, yes, I'm going to touch your face and your hair and your body, and I'm going to see you are like me and I can do what you can do. So there's just no underestimating the power of that. And the fact that if we make that happen, we will see that in every C-suite, I believe.
And then I'm always like hitting somebody over the head too. And then I think you are then able to see when you don't see that representation, to be able to forcefully ask, why don't you have this? If we can elect, if the woman can run the United States of America, why do you only have panels with only men on them? Why is your board of directors absent of women? I think it's not even just that the women can step up and say, I see myself there. It does not provide cover then for other organizations and institutions to systematically disallow women to participate. And so I think it's twofold. It is women will be more encouraged to go forward, but we won't be having conversations about pioneers of women we couldn't fight, we don't know, because we will see what is absolutely possible when women are allowed to be in these spaces, that we will be unaccepting of spaces that exclude them.
Wonderful. So let's thank our amazing panelists.